Segment 1, the trigger event. To understand the plan, we first have to understand the fear. Why is China doing this now? Why the sudden acceleration? The answer lies in a specific date, February 26, 2022. Russia invades Ukraine. The West is furious. And within 48 hours, the United States and Europe did something that absolutely shocked the financial world. They froze Russia's foreign reserves. Basically, Russia had about $300 billion sitting in Western banks. Money they had saved from selling oil. Money they thought was theirs. And with a single keystroke, the US said, "You can't touch this anymore." Now, regardless of what you think about the war or the morality of it, the economic message was terrifying to Beijing. China looked at that and realized something chilling. They realized if they can do that to Russia, they can do that to us. If China ever decides to take Taiwan, or if they get into a conflict in the South China Sea, the US could legally steal trillions of dollars of Chinese wealth overnight. The dollar wasn't just a currency anymore. It was a leash, and China decided it was time to cut the leash. But here is the catch. You can't just stop using the dollar. It's everywhere. It is the oxygen of the global economy. So, you have to build a trap. You have to build a parallel system, step by step. And the first step, you stop trusting paper, and you start trusting metal. Segment 2, the gold hoard. The first pillar of the plan is simple: get real assets. If you watched my last video on the US debt, you know that the US dollar is essentially backed by faith and credit. It's paper backed by debt. China knows this. So, for the last 24 months, the People's Bank of China has been on a shopping spree. But they aren't buying dollars. They aren't buying US Treasury bonds anymore. They are buying gold, tons of it. Every single month, China is importing massive amounts of physical gold. And they are doing it quietly. Many experts believe the official numbers released by China are a lie. They believe the real stockpile is thousands of tons larger than they admit. Why? Because you can't freeze gold. If you have gold bars sitting in a vault in Shanghai, the US president can sanction you all he wants. The gold is still there. It is still valuable. China is building a sanction-proof war chest. They are preparing for a world where the dollar goes to zero, or where they are cut off from the dollar system entirely. But hoarding gold isn't enough to kill the dollar. Gold is a defensive move. To actually win, you need to go on offense. You need to attack the dollar's source of power. Segment 3, the petro-yuan. This is the most dangerous part of the story for the United States. It involves something called the petrodollar. Since the 1970s, there has been an unwritten rule in the global economy, a secret handshake between America and Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia, the king of oil, sells its oil exclusively in US dollars. Think about what that means. If France wants oil, they need dollars. If Japan wants oil, they need dollars. If Brazil wants oil, they need dollars. This creates a permanent, artificial demand for American currency. It forces every country on earth to hold dollars in their bank accounts just to keep their lights on. It is the engine of the American superpower. But China is pouring sugar in the gas tank. China is now the world's largest importer of oil. They buy more than anyone else. They are the biggest customer. And President Xi Jinping has made a very simple offer to Saudi Arabia and the Gulf states. We buy your oil, but we don't want to pay in dollars anymore. We want to pay in yuan. Now, normally the Saudis would say no, because who wants Chinese yuan? It's not as stable as the dollar. But here is the brilliant strategic twist. China said if you don't want to hold our yuan, you can immediately exchange it for gold on the Shanghai exchange. This is the petro-yuan, gas for gold. If Saudi Arabia starts accepting Chinese money for oil, the global demand for the US dollar collapses. Suddenly, countries don't need dollars to survive. And we are already seeing the cracks. In 2023, Saudi Arabia stated they are open to trading in other currencies. Iran is already selling oil to China in yuan. Russia is selling oil to China in yuan. The monopoly is broken, and without the petrodollar, the US dollar is just a piece of paper with $34 trillion of debt attached to it. Segment 4, the alternative network, CEPS versus SWIFT. But there is still a problem. Even if you have the gold, even if you have the oil deals, how do you actually move the money? Right now, the world uses a system called SWIFT. When you send an international wire transfer, it goes through SWIFT, and SWIFT is effectively controlled by the West. This is how they sanctioned Russia. They just kicked them off the messaging app for banks. So China realized, we need our own internet for money. Enter CIPS, the cross-border interbank payment system. It sounds boring. It sounds like technical jargon. But this is the artillery of the financial war. CIPS is China's version of SWIFT. It allows banks to talk to each other and move money around the world without ever touching the US banking system, without ever asking for American permission. 10 years ago, CIPS was a joke. Almost no one used it. Today, it processes hundreds of billions of dollars. Banks in Russia, in Brazil, in Africa, in the Middle East, they are all plugging into this new system. It is a dark network for global finance. And the scary part? If the US tries to sanction China tomorrow, China can just flip a switch and say, that's fine, we will use our own rails. The weapon of sanctions is becoming obsolete. Hey, really quickly, I know this is heavy stuff. We are talking about the potential collapse of the global financial order. If you are finding this deep dive valuable, if it is connecting the dots for you, please hit the like button. It really helps us bypass the algorithm and get this information out to more people. And if you want to follow this story as it develops, make sure you are subscribed. Okay, back to the plan. Back. Segment 5, the BRICS expansion. So China has the gold, they have the oil mechanism, they have the payment network, but you can't fight the United States alone. You need a team, you need an alliance. For decades, the US had NATO and the G7, the cool kids club of rich democracies. So China is building its own club, the BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. For a long time, Western economists laughed at BRICS. They said it was just a random group of developing nations. They aren't laughing anymore. Last year, the alliance expanded. They invited Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Iran, Egypt, Ethiopia. Look at that list again. It includes the world's biggest oil producers, the world's biggest commodity producers, the world's biggest populations. And China is the leader of the pack. The goal of BRICS is explicitly to de-dollarize. They are discussing creating a new shared currency, not a paper currency like the euro, but a currency backed by resources, backed by oil, backed by gold, backed by rare earth metals. Imagine a currency that actually has intrinsic value. If you are a developing nation in Africa, and you have a choice, do you hold the US dollar, which is losing 5% of its value every year to inflation? Or do you hold a BRICS currency that is pegged to the price of energy and gold? It is a very tempting offer. China isn't just offering a different currency. They are offering a different ideology. Segment 6, the digital yuan and surveillance. But this isn't just about old-school commodities. It is also about the future of technology. While the US debates about crypto regulation, China has already built the ultimate financial weapon, the eCNY, the digital yuan. This is a central bank digital currency. It isn't crypto. It isn't Bitcoin. It is money issued directly by the Chinese government on a blockchain they control. Here is why this is a threat to the dollar. It is programmable money. It can be sent instantly, anywhere in the world, without a bank in the middle. Imagine you are a merchant in Africa or Southeast Asia. To accept US dollars, you need a bank account. You need fees. You need delays. With the digital yuan, you just need a phone. China is airdropping this technology to countries along the Silk Road. They are saying, here, use our system. It is faster, it is cheaper, it is better. But here is the dark side. Because it is digital, China sees everything, every transaction, every purchase, every movement of wealth. If the digital yuan becomes the currency of Asia, Beijing will have a map of the entire economy in real time. It is the ultimate tool for economic espionage. And it bypasses the US banking system entirely. The US can't sanction a wallet that lives on a Chinese server. Segment 7. The nuclear option. But there is one final, terrifying card that China holds. We have to talk about the debt. China owns nearly $800 billion of US government debt. They are one of America's biggest landlords. For years, people have asked, what happens if China just dumps it? What happens if they sell it all at once? Economic mutually assured destruction. If China dumped $800 billion of treasuries onto the market tomorrow morning, The bond market would crash, interest rates in the US would skyrocket, the housing market would freeze, the stock market would collapse. It would cause a financial crisis that would make 2008 look like a gentle breeze. Now, most economists say China would never do that. It would hurt them too. Their investment would be worthless. And yes, that is true. In a time of peace, it would be suicide. But in a time of war, if China invades Taiwan and the US threatens to intervene, China could use that debt as a weapon. They could say, "Stay out of our way," or "We burn the global economy down." It is a financial nuke, and just like a real nuke, you don't actually have to use it for it to be effective. You just have to remind your enemy that you have it. Segment 8. The counter-argument now. I want to be fair here. I don't want to just sell you doom and gloom, because despite everything I just said, the US dollar is not going to die tomorrow. It is still stubborn. It is still strong. Why? Because of something called the milkshake theory. When the world gets scary, when wars break out, investors get scared. And when investors get scared, they don't run to China. They don't run to Russia. They run to the United States. They run to safety. Because for all its flaws, the US is still the deepest, most liquid, most trusted market in the world. And let's be honest, do you really trust the Chinese Communist Party with your life savings? Probably not. China has strict capital controls. You can't get your money out easily. The rule of law is flexible. So the dollar has a moat, a deep moat of trust and military power. But moats can dry up, and walls can crumble. And what we are seeing right now is China filling in the moat, bucket by bucket. Conclusion, the cycle of empires. So, where does this leave us? We are watching history in slow motion. Ray Dalio, the famous investor, talks about the big cycle. Empires rise. They become the world reserve currency. They get rich. They get lazy. They borrow too much money. And then a challenger rises. It happened to the Dutch. It happened to the British. And the math says it is happening to the Americans. China's plan isn't to destroy the dollar overnight. Their plan is death by 1,000 cuts. A gold purchase here. An oil deal there. A new payment system here. They are building a world where the US is just optional, where they can trade and grow and fight without ever needing permission from Washington. And if they succeed, the American century is over. We will enter a multipolar world, a fractured world, a world where your money might need to be in gold or Bitcoin or a basket of currencies just to stay safe. The war has already started. The shots just haven't been fired yet. The only question is, are you watching the battlefield? Outro, thank you for watching this trilogy. We started with how the US built its power in WW2. We looked at how debt is destroying that power from the inside. And today we looked at the challenger waiting outside the gates. If you missed the first two parts, I highly recommend going back and watching them to get the full picture. And let me know in the comments, do you think the yuan will actually replace the dollar? Or is this all just hype? I read every comment. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you want to stay ahead of the curve. I'll see you in the next one. Scion, the cycle of empires. So, where does this leave us? We are watching history in slow motion. Ray Dalio, the famous investor, talks about the big cycle. Empires rise. They become the world reserve currency. They get rich. They get lazy. They borrow too much money. And then a challenger rises. It happened to the Dutch. It happened to the British. And the math says it is happening to the Americans. China's plan isn't to destroy the dollar overnight. Their plan is death by 1,000 cuts. A gold purchase here. An oil deal there. A new payment system here. They are building a world where the US is just optional. Where they can trade and grow and fight without ever needing permission from Washington. And if they succeed, the American century is over. We will enter a multipolar world, a fractured world, a world where your money might need to be in gold or Bitcoin or a basket of currencies just to stay safe. The war has already started. The shots just haven't been fired yet. The only question is, are you watching the battlefield? Outro, thank you for watching this trilogy. We started with how the US built its power in WW. We looked at how debt is destroying that power from the inside. And today we looked at the challenger waiting outside the gates. If you missed the first two parts, I highly recommend going back and watching them to get the full picture. And let me know in the comments, do you think the yuan will actually replace the dollar? Or is this all just hype? I read every comment. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you want to stay ahead of the curve. I'll see you in the next one.